Okay, we can call this meeting to order, please. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for turning up to this small gathering. It's exceptionally kind of you, especially you taking your own time up. I'm chairing this meeting for Sam Bambridge, who's very kindly called this meeting and these two people together. This is a fact-finding mission only, questions and answers. It is absolutely not in any way, shape or form lobbying RiverOak in any way, shape or form, and they will not be selling anything to us. It is purely a fact-finding mission only. Now, the floor is going to be open for any questions you have. Make the questions as difficult and as unkind as you like, because at the end of the day, this company is under your scrutiny, as it is everybody else's. It's just a pity there's not more people here to actually ask questions that are necessary. Okay, anybody prepared to ask a question?
Yes, if I may. Tony, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Just for the purpose of the tape, I feel like I'm in a sort of police station. It's Councillor Carol Partington. The question is, after the PwC report, one of the things that it talked about was the issue or the lack of communication or the communication issues between TDC and RiverOak. I was hoping this time around that level of communication may have improved. So if I put it to you, do you think that level of communication has improved as a result of that report, or is it still very similar to when you had to do all this the first time round?
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And just to endorse, this is not lobbying by us, and my phone's going to go in a moment. Also, just in case you wonder, this is not bad manners on my part. I've asked George Yerrell, one of my American partners, to dial in, so he'll be on loudspeaker, so he can A, hear what you're saying, and B, he can answer anything if he thinks I'm not dealing with it properly. The answer is, communication is different from what it was before. Previously, we did have meetings with the Cabinet and with other group leaders on 2 occasions, I think. But when the Council embarked on the process that PwC described, the meetings were very limited. There was one actual meeting with officers, and then there was no further communication. Communication was shut down, and we were told, we've got everything we need, we're now writing our report. And what we would say is that when the report was written, it was a travesty. And there were a lot of things that we felt, if we'd been able to explain them properly, how private equity works, how you set up your operational companies in separate silos, all properly funded, that we could have got that across, but we were not given the opportunity. When the new council was elected, we thought it would be different. It was, but it was different in a different way. We were basically having a dialogue with one person. We have asked if we could meet with the Cabinet. We've had no response to that. We have had, I think, 2 meetings with the leader of the council and officers, and that's all. And then there was the one meeting on the 4th of September, and the one that was at the beginning of the period of radio silence, which was attended by George Yerrell, who I hope is going to ring me shortly, and our legal advisors are here. Right on cue. Hello, George. You're right on cue. I'm going to put you on loudspeaker now, so mind your language. Okay. Can you hear me, George?
I can.
Okay, I think everyone can hear you.
Yes, welcome to the meeting, George.
And I'm just in the middle.
Good morning. Good afternoon, I should say.
Yes, indeed.
I'm just in the middle of answering a letter from Councillor Partington as to how things had changed in terms of communication with the council between the previous council and this one. And sorry, this is for George's benefit. So I'm summing up for your benefit by saying that last time we did have at least 2 meetings with the Cabinet and with opposition leaders, big meetings, but when it came to the process described by PwC, it was narrowed right down. There was one meeting that you and Niall attended with officers, and then the dialogue stopped, and then at the end of it they produced a report which I've used the word travesty, that we felt was a travesty, and there was no further dialogue after that. What I've said is that this time round it was different in the sense that we were effectively dealing with one person. We've had no access to members of the Cabinet despite repeated requests, no larger meetings, and that the meeting on the 4th of September, which everyone's now heard about, was attended by the Leader of the Council, the Council's Chief Legal Advisor, 2 representatives from their lawyers, by you, George, and by our legal and other representatives. So it's been different dialogue, but it really hasn't been a great deal more constructive. Please you add anything or correct me if you think I've got that.
No, I think
wrong.
that's accurate.
Yeah. Okay, Carol's nodding her head.
Thank you. Do you think sorry, I'll put it out a different way. What do you think could have been improved with communication, either on your part or TDC?
Well, we think very strongly that it would have been helpful if we could have presented to every single elected member and exposed ourselves to questions, however difficult, however searching, and that at another level, at a sort of managerial level, if there'd been a meeting with the Cabinet, which could have been confidential if the law allows it, where the Cabinet could have asked commercially sensitive questions of us, other members of the Cabinet, not just the leader. But that's not happened. And the frustration for all of us, but for me in particular as the man on the spot, is that I get inquiries from elected members, or sometimes indirectly, and I realise that they're asking a genuine question because they don't know and because they've got no access to information. We have the answers, but we are not able to give them. George?
I'm afraid I didn't hear her question, Tony.
Sorry.
Could you just repeat it for me?
The question was, in what way could communication with the council have been improved upon this time round?
Or by yourselves?
What could
the answer, but
or what could we have done?
I'm sorry.
Or what could we have done that would have been better than what we actually did?
Well, I don't think that in the end, posting messages on our website is the ideal way. We've only done that because we felt there was no other way. And so what we would have preferred were, more than one meeting and meetings with more than one representative of the council in an effort to, work through what is a relatively specialized area of law that we've spent 18 months and many dollars researching and feel we know pretty well.
Can I just ask a quick question whilst we're on this topic?
Yes.
Can I ask, how much so far has your company invested so far into getting yourself into this situation, out of your own funds? How much have you actually invested so far?
That's Connor, George. Do you want to answer that?
Hi, Connor. About, I'd say well over £1 million.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Well, it's not excellent at all, actually.
Well, it's excellent. It's showing extreme commitment on yourselves, and it's showing also that you are committed to a purpose, to an end.
Yeah.
The sense of opinion I was getting from the leader at the beginning was that this was very wishy-washy. They were showing no commitment whatsoever, but nobody commits £1 billion of their money if you're not committed. It was kind of put over that you were doing a few flights from America, and that was it. So, thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Sam Banbridge. I just wanted to ask what you consider to be the roadblock or the roadblocks to continuing with the CPO process now.
Well, I'm going to start this and then let George...
So, Tony, would you... I'm sorry, would you just repeat the question so I can hear it before you answer it?
Yes, Sam's just asked what we consider are the roadblocks and what we think needs to happen to get the show on the road again.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's go back to recent history. So, on the 4th of September, we had the meeting at the lawyer's office. There was an agenda, and it was agreed that everything that needed to be discussed would be discussed. It was not a very long meeting. It was about an hour and a half. It was constructive. A minute of the meeting was taken, and in simple terms, it was agreed that we would write what we called a white paper, which explained why it was that we were covering the risks, not why, we explained that we were covering the risks of the council, that everything we were doing was compliant with the national circular on this point, and established practice and so on. And in return, it was agreed that Thanet would produce, would finally review the indemnity agreement that we'd sent to them months ago, and would make amendments as appropriate. And there was specific discussion at the meeting about the bond issue, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And I think it's fair to say that on the council side, they listened to what we had to say and said they would reserve their position until they'd read the document that our lawyers were going to write. Those documents were exchanged, and I think it's fair to say that the issues were narrowed down. This is we're venturing into areas of commercial sensitivity here, but
correct.
We're I can hear George's nervousness from 5,000 miles away, and the issues are how can I put it, the timing of the bond and the time in which the right to take possession of the site is exercised after the CPO is confirmed by the Secretary of State. And there was an exchange of comments, of emails between the lawyers. We were saying, this is our position. We heard back that this is what our clients instruct us, that's TDC, is their position. And at that point, George Yerrell, who's at the other end of the phone, got an email from Chris Wells, dated the 7th of October, not from the lawyers, not from Tim Howes, but from Chris Wells personally, direct to George Yerrell, raising 8 points which had not been tabled at the meeting on the 4th of September, were new, were, in our view, without any merit at all, but seemed to us to be grounds for further delay and disputation. And that was the point at which, after very careful reflection, we decided that this negotiation was going nowhere. George, if you've anything on that you want to pick up, please do.
Well, that's generally correct. So I had specifically asked for a specific answer to the issue of, as opposed to the general concept of, well, we can't have any liability, telling me what the idea of the liability, what he thought the liability was, should the Secretary of State confirm the CPO, and for some reason RiverOak would walk away, having by that time spent £3 or £4 million altogether. And when I got back for an answer, and this was all being done on the phone, and I thought we had agreed we'd talk later in the week, and when I got back for an answer was the 8-point email raising all kinds of issues that had never been raised before, and more importantly, never answering the question I asked. And that's when it became my belief that there really was no interest, and our belief as well, that based on the conversations we'd had in person and on the phone, that we were just really running around in circles in the name of acting like we were making progress.
And I think what I'd like to add is that you'll see I've got a pile of documents here, I've reviewed them again over the weekend. We say that the indemnity agreement in the form that it's now in, which includes a requirement on our part to put £2 million into an escrow account and make sure that never drops below £1 million, and a requirement on our part to put a bond in place at the point when the Secretary of State upholds the CPO, we say that that's a document that could be signed tomorrow. It complies with national guidelines, it complies with standard practice, and it covers all the Council's risks, and that therefore anything over and above that that's being requested by Mr. Wells personally, or indeed by his lawyers at his instruction, is unreasonable. You agree with that, George?
Yeah, I think that represents our opinion, having looked at this exhaustively for 18 months and having done, a lot of research, not only legal research, but also custom and practice research with our CPO advisor, who is the senior CPO expert at CBRE in London and has done, many CPOs. I don't want to come across like, we know everything and nobody else knows anything, because I think that's unfair, but we're very clear about the simplicity of what we believe and why, and it's never really been disproven. It's really more, I think, coming from the standpoint of, well, whether or not that's true, we want these other things because that's what we want. And our contention is that just in the wanting of these things that we feel are commercially unreasonable, it's the same thing as setting a bar that could never be gotten over.
And I know Helen's got her hand up. I just want to, in case we missed the point, the lawyers are acting for us. I know they're acting for us, and we're paying for them. Rag Lawrence Graham are probably the country's leading experts in compulsory purchase. They act for local authorities up and down the country. And when we instructed them, first of all, to draft the indemnity agreement, we were very clear with them. We said, no funny tricks, no small print. Let's make this fair and plain. And one of the issues, and this is actually my responsibility in the very early days, when you run the compulsory purchase process, that's from serving the notice on the owner to the Secretary of State's decision, including the public inquiry, there are basically two ways of doing it. One is the council pays for everything and recovers the money from its partner. The other is that the partner puts all the money into a pot and the council spends the money with the partner's approval. I said the first option isn't going to work here because Thanet doesn't have the funds to support this, so we are going to have to do this. So the request for a bond to cover the CPO process isn't relevant. You only put the bond in to cover the process if the council is paying money out and wants to be guaranteed that it can collect from its partner. So we had the whole thing drafted in that way from day one to avoid that requirement. So the bond only came in for the later stage where you won the CPO, you're now going to take possession, You therefore have to pay the owner, and if the council thinks we haven't got the money to pay the owner, before they exercise the right, we have to take out a bond. That's how that arose. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much for that. I believe Helen's got a question, but I think, is it Jeff or Ash who's got the hand up as well? Well, straight after Helen.
Ash has got the next question, George.
Helen, sorry.
Yep, Helen.
Sure.
Whoever. Go on, Ash. You go.
Following on from this, right? I'm over there, sorry.
Yes, so you can be clear to.
Sorry.
If you come nearer the phone, George can hear the question as well.
Hi, George. This is Councillor Ash Ashby.
Good afternoon, Ash.
Good afternoon. I think our problem here in Thanet is people just understanding this. Although a lot of us understand the process, I believe, and my question is, can you confirm that at any stage through this process, from when it commences through to the first aircraft landing at Manston Airport, would the taxpayer, or the electorate in this case, would any of their tax money from the electorate be at risk at any point, at any time during this process?
George?
There's really no reason that I can foresee where taxpayer money would be put at risk.
Okay.
The offer has been to fully indemnify the council for all costs running the CPO. That offer is backed by an agreement to put £2 million in escrow before we start, and then make sure that that account never dips below £1 million. There doesn't seem to be any. It is commonly believed that the £2 million in and of itself is more than enough to run any CPO process.
Okay.
However, to further assure our partner, we've offered to, upon the confirmation of the CPO, bond the purchase of the land. So at that point, there really isn't any risk to the council.
Okay, so your partner, and let's be clear about this, your partner is not TDC. Your partner is 120,000 people in the district of Thanet. They are your partners. So if they can understand this, and I can stand up and ask the leader, who is their representative, he is the representative of 120,000 people in this district. If I ask him that question and he tells me otherwise, then he is actually telling a lie.
It's misleading.
So he's misleading the people that he is leading in this district. That's just all I want to confirm. So I need to be sure, if I stand up and ask him that question and he says that the electorate are at risk, then basically he is a barefaced liar. And I think this is the one and only message we need to get across to the people of Thanet, because that is what the stick he is using to beat the people with. And I think this is all we need to do. We need just to confirm this. And we have to keep it in layman's terms, and exactly how you explained it there. Our main problem is actually getting this message across the whole island. If we can do that, and if we can fly it on the back of an aeroplane, then even better, but we have to do this. And this is the only stumbling block. Mr. Wells can put as many as he likes, but at the end of the day, that is what he's leading people to believe. The word on the street is that we are at risk of losing money. If we can get the electorate to understand that there is absolutely no risk, this is like me giving them £1,000 to go and put it on a horse that they might like to fancy. It's a win-win for them. If the horse wins, then fine. If it doesn't, they haven't lost anything. So this is exactly the analogy we need to use. And I must refrain from actually using gambling terms, because probably one day that will come back to haunt me. But as far as I'm concerned, if someone gave me a gift of £1,000 to put on a horse of my choice, it doesn't really matter if it wins or loses, I don't lose. Yeah. So this is all we have to get the people to understand. And it's not Wells that we need to understand, because He knows perfectly well what the answer is. The problem is that we have to get 120,000 people to understand this. If we do that, then the battle is won. But all the while he holds the cards, then we can't do anything about it. So this is what we need to go out there and give our electorate to understand. The people that voted us in, our job is to make sure they know the truth, and that a truthful decision has been arrived at. So I think that is our main challenge.
Well put.
And just to...
the point I was trying to make earlier was I've never been able to get the leader to articulate for me what he thinks the risk is at any particular stage.
Because you can't prove a negative, George. That's the whole problem, and that's what he's struggling with. He can't prove a negative. There is no risk, so that's why he struggles with it. But,
and also just to remind everyone, there was a point when we were made aware that it was being said that we hadn't got any money, so we deposited $2 million with our solicitors. But it would seem that that's still not enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's been sitting there for weeks.
It's called moving the goalpost. Helen.
Well, if I could just come in. Hi, George. It's Helen here.
But hold on one second, because I think, and I don't want to throw cold water on the parade, but the assertion that anyone can make that there is absolutely no risk ever, that's just a hard assertion to make in business. So when you try to argue this from the standpoint of, well, there is never possibly ever going to be a situation where something could go wrong that nobody's thought of yet, that's a hard assertion to fight against, and that's been pretty much what we're fighting against. From a realistic, we understand the law, we understand the process, we understand the cost, and we've set aside all the money that's required to handle it. There isn't any reasonable person, I think, that would look at this and say, well, there's a big risk over here, or there's even a small risk over there. But I think that just to give advice, when people start talking in absolutes, so if you tell yourself that you want to tell the 120,000 residents of Thanet that they can rest assured that there is absolutely never, ever going to be any risk, the next thing you're going to hear from somebody is, well, will you represent that, sign for it, and underwrite it? So that's essentially what we've done. Okay? But it still hasn't been enough. And I don't know why.
Well put, George.
Hi, George. It's Helen Smith here. Right. I'll go in reverse. The indemnity agreement. Is it possible for the councillors here to see the indemnity agreement? Because nobody has.
Tony, you probably can. The answer is that we put the indemnity agreement in the public domain. I just don't remember when. Right offhand, do you, Tony?
No, I don't. But actually, there is no reason why not. Indemnity agreements go in the public domain. That's why people have been sending us hundreds of indemnity agreements from up and down the country.
Right.
Oh, that's true.
Are those ones that have been signed, though? Is that because this is a working draft?
But it doesn't. It's not that commercially sensitive. I mean, I had one with me.
I mean, I would check with our attorney before doing it just to make sure.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
No.
The only thing I would say about it is that when you put something like that in the public domain, you'll have a number of people who have difficulty not reading it, but interpreting it. And
I wasn't meaning the public domain.
Ways that people who aren't familiar with the process can try to attack the agreement, creating sort subterfuge, for lack of a better term. So I think you have to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I wasn't actually meaning the public domain, George. I was meaning for the councillors, the elected councillors, to see. They might not be interested, but they might be.
I'm sorry.
Assuming people would be interested.
Yeah.
The answer is, I don't know why that would be a problem, but let me check.
Okay, that's lovely. People here will know probably a bit about the history of how I've come to be where I am with everything that's gone on. I became really, really concerned quite early on at how I was blocked as a cabinet member from information. I was told that the indemnity agreement by Tim Howes was the heads of terms. I knew different, obviously, because I've got a bit of a brain, but, then I was told that the only copy had been sent to the external solicitors when I queried, surely not. I was told, oh, well, maybe there's a copy in my office. Then when I challenged again, I challenged the leader, and I was told, oh, well, it's probably at home somewhere. I didn't find any of this acceptable. I asked for a file. It became blatantly apparent immediately that there wasn't a file. I'm giving all this, George, for the benefit of everybody, because I think this shows a history of failure within the council to properly communicate. And the very fact, you won't know this, but there's only a small group here today, because the monitoring officer has been threatening everybody that they mustn't attend, and we haven't got an officer present, which is why we're recording for transparency and for the record. But this is an absolute nonsense that elected councillors cannot fact find, and that's what we're here to do. I just have a little question about when I was a cabinet member. I was told by the Chief Executive and Tim Howes that the Dover CPO, in inverted commas, was an exact parallel to this and is why this couldn't work. I just wondered if it might be helpful to explain the difference, because I predict something like this coming up in the next two cabinet meetings.
I can answer that.
I'm sorry, what was the exact parallel?
The Dover compulsory purchase. Yeah. And what I was going to say...
So I'm not sure I know which Dover compulsory purchase you're referring to, but I've had a couple of meetings with Paul Watkins, and his version of how he goes about CPOs is quite a bit different. So they actually generally fund the CPO themselves and bill the partner. I think Tony referred to this earlier on as a reason why the partner might bond the cost of the CPO as opposed to what we're doing, which is put the cost of the CPO into a forward escrow account that can be drawn down. But Dover explained to me that the way they like to do it is to keep control of the process. I think they're more experienced in CPOs than many, and they know how they want it to go, so they make an agreement with their partner as to what the steps are going to be and how their steps are going to go about it. But then they fund the steps and bill the partner. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, and that's the key difference. We were told early on, well, they have a bond. That's the reason. But there is a second point, which is that when Dover do CPOs, they're doing them in relation to their core business. It can be either, the centre of town development, urban development, housing development, that kind of thing. This is an airport.
Or I think the port as well.
No, the port's not part of Dover.
I'm sorry.
Dover Port there was a CPO on the port.
No, it was the Harbour Board. It was the Harbour Board. But the point is, an airport is not part of any local authority's core business, which is why it's different.
Okay, one of these two ladies here.
Councillor Carol Partington again. I've actually got two questions, both of which are unrelated. So if I can just start with my first question. TDC can quite frankly stipulate the CPO process to be whatever they want it to be. There's guidelines out there that they can dictate how they want that process to take place. So they're saying to RiverOak, we want you to bond this at the beginning part of the process. If you're so committed to the airport, what is to stop you from doing that?
Well,
Okay, so Tony, you'll have to repeat that question.
the question was basically TDC can insist on any conditions that it wants. So if it insists on a condition that we bond up front, and we want to do the airport that badly, why don't we just agree to that condition?
The answer is because we can't, there's really nothing that we can bond. The only thing we can bond is what we've already covered, which is the cost of the CPO. So we're not going to put a bond on top of our £2 million. Trying to bond the land on a CPO that hasn't yet been confirmed means that we would be trying to get somebody to write a bond on something for which we have no insurable interest. So we've viewed that requirement, which they're absolutely, TDC is entitled to have, if they so choose, as a means of defeating a CPO, because essentially it's asking to find insurance on something for which there is no insurable interest that RiverOak holds.
It's a good question.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I wanted that.
Did that answer
Yes,
the
it did.
question?
Yes.
Well done.
And
You have a second? Oh yeah, sorry. And as I say, it's totally unrelated. We were all elected by the folk of Thanet, and one of the concerns at the moment is the rhetoric of legal proceedings that might take place from RiverOak on to TDC because of their whole the way they've handled this process. And what concerns me about that is that it's the people of Thanet that have elected us mainly on the back of Manston, are the people whose pockets it will affect if you indeed do go through that process. And I am concerned about that. And is that something that you're definitely thinking of doing?
well, George, before you answer on the proceedings, if I could just make one point.
Well, that's okay. I didn't hear the question.
All right. Right. The question was, if we were to take legal proceedings against the council, there would be financial, or there could be financial consequences for the local residents, because that wouldn't be covered by the indemnity agreement, obviously. And the question was, well, is how do we justify that? What I was going to say was, before you answer that, George, is that you made the point earlier that Thanet can ask for whatever it likes, however unreasonable. Actually, it can't. And what we're saying is, who is asking for this? Has this come from the elected council or from the cabinet? Where has it come from? And that is very, very important. That's why we wanted to meet the whole council and the whole cabinet. Because if there's the sort of dialogue that you've just heard with George explaining why we say the bond requirement is unreasonable, we believe that members of the council and members of the cabinet will say, we understand that and we accept that, and therefore we want that requirement to be removed. The problem we have is the process by which the decision is being made, and that's why we've made so much of the personal email from one man to another, from Mr. Wells to Mr. Yarrow. There's no evidence that these conditions are the policy of the council or the policy of the cabinet. So, I will let George answer in a moment. But where the potential for legal proceedings arises, and it arises if the council is behaving unreasonably, is if the council permits one person to make unreasonable requirements for a potential commercial partner, thereby exposing the council to legal risk. That's the issue, really. But, George, do you want to finish the point?
Yeah, sure. we've wanted to do for 18 months is get a fair hearing in our effort to buy the airport. I mean, I don't mean to make light of anything, but it has been an amazingly frustrating process just to do something which we've been led to believe at every stage was something that was wanted by the general population and had a political basis for to restore this airport to a functioning piece of infrastructure in a time where airport capacity, particularly in the southeast, is an important issue.
Absolutely.
So at some point when we just get run around a bunch of imaginary options, it gets frustrating, or not options, obstacles. Mm-hmm. It's gotten very frustrating, and so I'm just seeking a way to try to get the council to essentially hold itself, and I don't mean this in a lecturing manner, but the council to hold itself accountable for what it wants. And I realize that there are procedures and there are ways that things need to be done in the UK and within the UK political structure, and I don't want to be, I'm not a politician, and I'm not a political figure. So all I'm trying to do is find ways to get somebody to react to what I think is a very simple, positive message about bringing back this airport to function in light of the fact that, it's now... see, how do I say this? That it's been hard to get a fair shake from the administrations we've spoken to.
I think we've got another question for you, George. Coming in your direction.
Councillor Jonathan Curran here. Sorry, Councillor Jonathan Curran here.
Go ahead.
Just to say we're all 100% behind the airport, but what I'm looking at is perhaps the future now. You've just made a very good point that you've had nothing but obstacles put in your way, and I think we've all been aware of that over the last 18 months, and we're just as frustrated as you are. If for the next couple of weeks the Cabinet decide that they're not going to go through with the CPO process, where does that leave you? Because there may be an opportunity after that for you to be able to voice your opinions probably more openly, and perhaps we could do the same.
I've frequently been asked over the course of 18 months whether or not, if a certain event happens, whether we're going to give up. And there's a part of me that smiles whenever I'm asked that, because at this point, we've been asked that question so many times and never given up. So where we are is that we believe that there's a will of the people to have this airport, and that there's a general will within the council.
You're right there, George. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yes, you're correct.
They're agreeing with you, George.
So until we don't believe that, and I don't see that changing, we're not going to give up.
Well, I've got something to tell you, George. Obviously you can't see, but we are actually in a room in a hotel where all the candidates for UKIP actually came for training. And it's really surreal, because it is an irony, because just across there's a little stage in that corner. Can you see it, guys? Yep. And there's a board, I think it's probably the original board, where the 10 pledges to Thanet were written. And at the top of that board was the CPO. And Chris Wells wrote it.
Oh my God.
CPO. On that board. And, yes, can you remember? Right. And I asked him the question, we're going to go out there to the electorate, to the public, and we're going to sell that promise. Can you stand by that promise? have you enough information? Do you have enough nous about you to take this forward? Are you fully appraised of everything? He stood on that stage and said categorically yes. He had the information and the knowledge to move that CPO process forward. So we could go out in a certain knowledge to the electorate that we could actually give that promise and see it through. And as I said to him at the meeting the other night, you're not the same man that spoke pre-election. You're totally a different man. You're backtracking, and it's very apparent that you weren't aware of the situation. Or if you were, then something's happened between then and now. You know, and that is basically the situation. It's incredible.
Right. No, and look, you know, it's always hard when someone looks you in the eye and tells you they're going to do something and they don't do it.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, I've got a very pertinent question to put to you. It's a question I know the answer to.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very pertinent, it's a hard-hitting question, but I do know the answer to this. By the way, Iris Johnson gave her apologies. She couldn't be along. She wanted to, but she couldn't. And she's mentioned this to me on several occasions. Now, the Cabinet are not here because of the threat of being sued or reprisals or whatever from TDC. Fine, okay. I'm going to ask you a straightforward question. Has at any time the leader of the council, Chris Wells, met with you guys privately or any of your investors without an officer or anybody with him?
The answer to that question is yes.
Thank you.
Not with myself, but with one of my partners and a potential investor.
Thank you. So on that basis, if we're going to follow TDC protocols, he shouldn't have a say in the vote whatsoever.
Yeah, well played.
Yeah?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
I say, if we're going by TDC protocols then, if that is the case, then Councillor Wells, the leader, should have no say whatsoever, because not only has he met with you in private, I happen to know for a fact he's met with other investors privately, so therefore he shouldn't have any say at all in the vote.
Well, again, you're making a conclusion that I don't know the answer to relative to how the process and
I understand what you're saying.
Works.
Yeah. But you've answered my question. He has unilaterally gone to discussions with investors by himself without an officer or any member with him. And that's good enough for me. That's the answer I wanted. You're correct. Yes, I know for a fact he's told me. And I don't know how he can justify that. I really don't.
If I might put something forward, just as a suggestion, you know, there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 9 councillors here today, George. There should have been a lot more, but for the threats from the monitoring officer. I would like to suggest, and I know that Connor has already left a voicemail for the leader of the Conservatives about this, if you don't mind me mentioning this.
No, not at all.
I would like to suggest to everybody here what they might consider of this as an idea, that we hold or we organise an official meeting at TDC for all councillors for RiverOak to come, as they have today, to question and answer. Would everybody here feel comfortable with that?
Can I just add to that, Helen? And I don't know if you can hear me, George.
Tony, could you just repeat that since I didn't hear it?
What, the whole thing?
This or Carol's bit?
Helen said
No, Helen.
I assume that was Helen.
Yeah, Helen was suggesting that a bigger meeting take place at the council for all parties.
We call it an extraordinary meeting.
To ask questions of the RiverOak team. And she was asking other people present whether they thought that was a good idea. And Sam's about to respond. Carol, I'm sorry.
That's all right, don't worry. The only thing I would like to add to that, and my only concern about having a meeting where RiverOak and the councillors are asking questions, it's great in an open forum like this, as long as it doesn't impede any negotiations currently between RiverOak and TDC.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, I thought it was going.
You've got to go,
Sorry, actually this is for Tony.
Okay.
My understanding is that you were part of the plane station and you were involved in Manston before.
Yes.
Can you confirm that there was a successful cargo business there previously at Manston?
Yes.
And can you also talk to us a little bit about what your plans for Manston Airport in the future are?
Okay, I don't know if you heard that, George.
I did not.
Sam's asking about what happened when I was there with Plain Station and whether there was a successful cargo operation there and what our plans are for the future. So, there was a successful cargo operation at Manston throughout the whole of the 1980s, even before Plain Station. There was an entrepreneur called Clive Bourne, who had a company called Seabourne, and he made a deal with the RAF, and he operated what was called the civilian enclave there. They did some charter flights, and they did a lot of cargo, and he made a lot of money. It was a very successful business. He was a very shrewd man. And that continued up until the late 90s. There was talk about privatising the airport. The then MP for Thanet South, Jonathan Aiken, was against it, and because he was influential, it didn't happen. There was a change of government in '97. The new government said this space isn't required, and so they privatised it, and that's when Plain Station Wiggins came in. There was a lot of expenditure, and this is the other issue which I feel has confused things. When you convert from a military operation to a civilian operation, you have to spend a lot of money. CAA standards are very different from military standards. So the new control tower had to be installed, the runway had to be resurfaced, a whole lot of other stuff. Lighting, instrument landing systems and so on, all had to be done. A lot of money was spent. So the CapEx, I've forgotten, but it was 10, 12, 15 million pounds. It was a lot of money. The cargo operation continued, and it traded quite successfully. But of course, when people look back at the money that was spent, if you add in the CapEx, it then makes it look as if you're trading at a loss. So it worked well, and some of you will remember the main carrier was an airline called MK Cargo, and there was another one called DAS. Now, in fairness, in those days, those aircraft were a lot noisier than they are now. They were old 747-200s, which have long gone, and in those days the resistance to the airport was because of noise and because of the issue of night flying. And although there was very little night flying, there was a little bit. And in those days we had a penalty system, money was collected from the carrier, and it was paid to local good causes, playing fields and that sort of thing. I won't bore you with why it went bust. Basically, completely out of my hands, I'd gone, but the then chief executive gambled the whole company on a low-cost carrier, on a carrier which was operating small aircraft to a business model that needed big aircraft. What we've said for the future is that we'll turn the place round and make it break even by reinstating the cargo traffic, because the strong demand, the demand for that has increased since the airport closed. The carriers who used to use it are not as satisfied with the service that they get at other airports, I won't name them, and they're ready to come back, and have already acknowledged that they will pay higher tariffs than they paid before. We've then got, as you know, plans for engineering, which is aircraft tear down, not a scrapyard as has been said, but a proper managed recycling process, which is valuable, which will make money for the airport and will employ people. And we finally said that yes, we will look at passenger travel, because this is going to be a community airport of a kind, and if people need to be able to use their local airport, we're not saying, as has been said in the past, that it's going to be London's fifth airport and all that nonsense. But we believe it will be an airport where 3, 4 or 5 aircraft from a low-cost carrier will be based and will operate to leisure destinations in southern Europe, in the Mediterranean, maybe North Africa. That kind of thing.
Jersey would be good.
Jersey. Okay. So that's the scenario. But the one thing, and I will say this was before I was actually part of RiverOak, the first thing they said was, make make the case that this place can break even within 18 months. And we did. And that case was based on real numbers that were provided by the previous owners, so we know exactly what the airport was doing almost up to the day that it closed. It wasn't guesswork, it wasn't speculative. And so that's the basic starting point. Now, I'll just ask George if he endorses that, for that which he knows, in case I've overstepped the mark.
Well, if I heard you correctly, Tony, you just gave a brief history of your involvement with the airport and then said that we were able to make a business case relatively, I don't want to say easily, but relatively swiftly for a landing frequency which was not particularly onerous, that would take the airport back to break even. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And then going on from there to... You need to go, don't you? Yeah, okay. Thanks for coming. Are we done?
No, we don't. You just had to leave because of a commitment. No, we're still continuing.
Unless anyone else has got a question, may I? Again.
Yeah, go on. No, ask
your white paper that you spoke about earlier, is that the same as doing the public, what do they call it, public...
Consultation.
Thank you. Is that the same thing, or is that something different?
It's something different. It is basically, I mean, I'll show you what it looks like because I've got it here in front of me. It's basically a document prepared by our lawyers. It's headed Proposed CPO Indemnity Relationship, the requirements of the circular of 06 of 2004. Yeah. So what it does is it says that there's a government circular that went, and it's 11 years old now, which is about, George, I'm just gesturing with my finger and thumb, which is thick.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Tony.
Oh, I don't know why. What I've just... So the question was about the white paper, and what I've said is that the document that we put together demonstrates to Thanet how our proposals tie in with the CPO circular that the government issued 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Point by point by point.
Yeah.
On the financial requirements, yes.
Yes.
Would RiverOak consider a public meeting in, say, the Winter Gardens, so that everybody can go along and listen to this? If we can arrange one, would they consider doing that?
I think...
So you have to repeat.
Sorry, George, the question from Ash was, would RiverOak consider holding a public meeting in the Winter Gardens so that everyone can hear all this?
Yeah, I think our position from the very beginning is we've got nothing to hide, and we'd welcome any public meeting or any meeting of the council. I think that the one thing we don't want to do is hold a meeting that will only, set political forces in stone against us that can defeat us.
Yeah. Well, can I ask
and also, if I could just say, the other thing we're conscious of is that, in May, however you measure it, 75-80% of those who voted for parties and candidates that supported the CPO. So in many ways you could say we know what the public view is, don't we?
Yeah. Well, just another straightforward question for you, George. I mean, you're business people. You're used to dealing in multi-million-pound deals on a regular basis. That's your bread and butter. Are you finding it difficult to deal with this guy, with the leader, Chris Wells? Do you feel he has the ability to take this deal forward? Do you think he has the credibility? Do you feel comfortable dealing with him? And your instinct, deep down, do you feel he wants this deal?
And I'm sorry, who's asking?
It's Councillor Connor Collins. Connor.
Oh, hi, Connor.
Hi.
Sorry. Well, I stated in my letter that we posted a week or so ago that I am convinced that he doesn't want to do the deal. And so it's not about whether I'm comfortable in the room or whether I'm comfortable with him or not, because I don't.
Maybe I can reword that.
Kinds, and I don't really. It doesn't matter to me who I'm dealing with, as long as I believe that we're towards a common goal.
Yeah.
But when I came to the conclusion that I was seeing a telephone book list of items that had never been raised before, while the question I asked was never getting answered, I knew in my stomach that for whatever reason, I was working with somebody who didn't want to do a deal regardless of what he says.
Well, if I sort of reword it then, do you feel that these guys are out of their depth? And the reason I say that is because when initially all the information was passed over for CPO advisal, it was sent to KCC. Now they're quite good at that job. They are experts in that field. And the solicitors were given the information and they said, we can't see a problem with this. So therefore, at the later stage, when it was passed over to solicitors, it was a choice. And it was either KCC or two others. I believe that the workload for KCC was given quite a large amount of work, and the other two were given a slightly lesser amount of work, which obviously would make their fee a lot cheaper. But they decided to go for a cheaper solicitor. Do you feel confident that these guys that are actually dealing with it now and TDC are competent in dealing with this? Do you think they have the knowledge?
I'm willing to comment on that, but I'll say this. Is a respected firm that does numerous public entity transactions. Sharp Pritchard is a respected firm that has a single junior associate that specializes in CPOs.
But the idea was for the two solicitors to fight this out amongst themselves without the hindrance of either yourselves or the council, for them to come to a conclusion and then feed back information. But all we seem to see is our client says on the behalf of TDC. So it appears that although they were given the instruction to sort it out between themselves as solicitors, there's been an awful lot of input from TDC. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, well, that's a different question than whether people are out of their depth. That runs to my belief that there's no interest in doing a deal.
Right. Yes.
Because I was under the same impression that you were, which was it was going to be let the solicitors talk and if they convince each other we'll be fine, but that's not how it turned out.
No, because they've been given instruction, I'm led to believe.
So, but I don't know if that has to do with competence or will or what it is, but it convinced me that there wasn't really an interest in going forward.
Yeah, thank you, George. Thank you.
It was one of the things that convinced me.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
No, I think we're all done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for braving the pressure not to show to come.
I think we're going to.
I appreciate it greatly, as you can imagine. I want to thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you for your patience.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.
All right, Tony.
Personally, I think I sleep better by coming than people that didn't come are going to sleep tonight.
Well, certainly they might be on the other side and don't care.
Okay, I'll bring this meeting to an end. This Tuesday the 20th at 3:10. Thank you very much, everybody, for turning up. Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.